right? Divorce feels for a lot of people like warfare. Anytime we feel like we're under attack, we tend to be a little narcissistic anyway. We go to survival mode. Anytime you put up opposition to a narcissist, eventually you cave. You cave because you don't want to take any more stuff from them, or you cave because you want to protect the children. Is the first thing you need to do is establish some kind of safety zone for yourself. It might be a room in the house. It might be a separate place to live, someplace where you can go, where you can close that person out, where they won't come in. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. And today we're talking about the empowered divorce, strategies for separating from a narcissist and reclaiming your life. And I've got an expert on this topic with me today, Chris Bruce from the Bruce Law Firm. Chris and his wife have been helping women to leave abusive relationships literally for years now. They're a family law firm that specializes in this. How are you today, Chris?
Rich, just as we were saying before we got on, I'm really excited to be here. It's fun to do this. I have a podcast of my own. It's nice to finally be a guest here, so I'm thrilled to get to do this with you.
I actually know what that feels like. For years, I did a podcast and never showed up on any, and then I just started showing up on them, and the hardest thing for me was to shut my mouth. Like, people would ask me a question, I give them like a 10-minute answer, and they'd be like, I'm working on sound bites today. That's my new challenge. Anyway, the audience would love to know, how did your heart lead you, and maybe your wife, I'm not sure if that was a together thing or a apart thing, how did it lead you into this work, helping women to leave abusive relationships?
So life's an interesting path, and got into family law with some things that happened with the economy, but that's the boring stuff. After doing this for about 7-8 years, I was reached a point where it was time to separate my practice from my partners, and I really, Rich, just tried to sit down and think about the people that I enjoyed helping the most, the people to where I felt like I was making a difference in their lives, that were nice to work with. And, there's some things in the world more than money. You want to feel like you're helping people, or at least I do. And it was interesting to me to see that almost all the clients that fit those boxes were women in relationships to where they're mostly being emotionally abused. A lot of them were married to controlling, manipulative, narcissistic type people. Sometimes I call them sociopaths. And that's the people I felt like I was helping most. And I decided to build my law firm around it when I separated off from my partners. And it's coming up on 6 years of fun doing it.
Congratulations and well done.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. It's a pleasure to do the work. I feel like we're helping people. That's why.
For the audience, I'm just going to lay out a quick broad definition of what a narcissist is. And, just audience, I want you to recognize that Chris and his wife help women in all kinds of abusive relationships. But it happens that a lot of them do involve narcissists. But as he mentioned, there's all kinds of abuse. Narcissism isn't the only one. But today, what we're talking about is there is a diagnosis called narcissism, right? Let's say there's a scale from 1 to 10, and out of 10 are people who are diagnosed as narcissists. Like these people they're all about them, and they have an amazing facility for taking anything and making it about them. It's actually kind of surreal when you meet I used to think my mother was like this, but then I realized she was just a mom. All right. On the other end, you've got maybe Mother Teresa. Right. So Mother Teresa is all about other people, and people on that scale, there are people who think about themselves a lot, but aren't diagnosable, but they're pretty ferociously about themselves. And then when you add to it the environment of divorce, right? Divorce feels for a lot of people like warfare. Anytime we feel like we're under attack, we tend to be a little narcissistic anyway. We go to survival mode. So if let's say you're a 7 or an 8 on this scale of 1 to 10, and then you're going into a divorce, you might start behaving like a 9 just because you're under attack. So that's what we're talking about here today. And Chris, tell us how do you? I guess the first thing is when people come to your office and they've got someone like this on the other side, what's the first thing they really need to do?
From my point of view, unless there's a real big legal reason they need to do something immediately, which is usually not the case. A lot of our clients have been married 20, 30 years. What we really want them to do is to go see a really, really good therapist that can help them understand how to process what's happening in their lives, and see the other person for who they are, and give them some practical strategies for dealing with it. And I think somebody, with your background could be very helpful too. Really, it's sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's really just more practical coaching, so that the person can understand. I mean, maybe they might understand that they actually have a healthy relationship that could be worked on, or get strategies for staying married to the person. Not everybody can or should get divorced, but if they're in the category of people who really need a divorce to have a healthy life, we want them to see a therapist for understanding the signs of the relationship they're really in, being able to see things like when their spouse talks, what they're really doing. Sometimes they use words that are scary, make them feel like they're on eggshells, and understand that that's the person, it's not the actual reality. And we want people to go do that, so that if they're going through a difficult divorce, number one, I mean, maybe they say they could improve the relationship and not end it legally, but number two, that they have the right state of mind to get through the divorce process, with these people can be hard. It can and usually is harder than it is with most people getting divorced. And number three, I mean, the whole point to divorce, besides getting happy and healthy and just feeling like you have a chance to enjoy your life, is to also, from my point of view, not repeat the same patterns in your life again, and not end up in a relationship, whether it's through marriage or just a friendship, through somebody else that has these qualities. Because most people who end up married to a true narcissist usually do so due to their upbringing and background, and unless they really understand what attracted them to those people in the first place, and some of the things that contributed to why they are the way they are, they're more likely to just replace their current husband or spouse with another version of the same problem, really.
All right, there was a lot in that, so I'm going to break it down into some pieces.
Yeah, there wasn't the soundbite yet.
No, it's okay. I am the master of not sound bites. Don't worry. But you actually crammed a lot of sound bites into a short space, which was pretty impressive. It usually takes me, by the way, about 20 minutes to do what you just did. So, you did really well with that. So it sounds like the first part is, you're in conflict with someone. You think maybe there's something wrong, not right with them. They're narcissistic. Go get some help. Get an outside perspective. You might want to see a therapist. You might want to see a coach. You might want to see both. Right. And, honestly, if you're in a relationship with someone who's showing narcissistic tendencies, I'd say go see a therapist first, and just so that you can get someone who has a clear, who's grounded in the DSM. What are we up to? 5 or 6 now? Who's grounded in.
Yeah, I think we're on 6. They keep counting. Yeah.
Who's grounded in basically in making a diagnosis, because they're going to help you to identify it. It also sounds like once you've identified what the waters are you're actually swimming in, then you have a decision to make. And then, so you can decide to stay in the relationship, you can decide to get out. And then the next part is, when you decide to get out, you want to make sure that you understand, part of the first part is really understanding what it is about you that got you into that relationship, so that as you extricate yourself, you're not inviting more of the same in the next possible relationship. That's a book right there, by the way, which is it's cool.
You got it down. You're a quick study, but yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Exactly.
Thank you, Master Yoda. Thank you, Master Yoda. So they come to you at the first. Let's talk about the first stage first, and let's hit all stages in this talk. So the first stage, they come to you and they know things are not good, and they go to the therapist or the coach or both, and they figure out, what, something really is wrong over there. He's gaslighting me, gaslighting me, audience, you probably heard the term, meaning he's convincing me that I'm crazy and that I'm wrong and that everything I say is upside down. He always has to win. I always feel like I'm losing. The only time I feel like I'm winning is when I'm in complete agreement with him. Those are all going to be signs that you've got someone on the other side who's narcissistic. Oh, yeah. So they get really clear. That's what's going on. What comes next with you? Like in the improvement process?
Yeah, so they have to get, if they made it the point to where they want to move on, or I guess really the first step is okay, well, you have all this, and I mean, it sounds awful what you just said. I'm glad that my life's not typically like that, but they do have to make a decision. I mean, do they do they want to make the best of the situation they're in? Maybe the bad parts, like what you just said, is infrequent. It's not happening all the time. They have to decide. I mean, is this something I want to try to live with and form my life around, minimizing the effect of that on me? And I don't pass judgment, because some people, I mean, they can do that. They just, doing that allows them to stop dealing with what's really bothering a lot of our clients.
I could see that. I could see if you had a value of family that was super high. Like, I'm going to stay together for the kids, and I'm going to take it on the chin with this guy or gal. Most usually they tend to be guys, though. I'm going to take it on the chin. I'm just going to figure out how to live with this situation so that our kids have a happy home. I could see that happening. But let's say they're done taking it on the chin. What comes next?
You got to get your ducks in. They have to get their ducks in a row. They have to make a plan. Good to have that plan reviewed by legal people. That's what we do. And then when the timing is right, you execute on that plan and you move forward. What you have to be when you're divorcing a narcissist or other species of these personality types is you have to be ready. You have to act. You have to show that you're decisive. You cannot show hesitation, and you got to have a plan that you can follow through on. And oftentimes, what you need to understand is just the reality, Rich, that these people they're difficult. When you place them in conflict, they're not going to act favorably. You really have to be prepared to show, I don't want to say be a pit bull or show force, but you have to show that you have a direct purpose, and they're not going to be, taken off of that direct path to leaving the relationship for what's fair by the tricks that they've used to control you throughout your whole marriage, which might be your whole adult life. So there's another long answer, but that's kind of that mindset piece.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, because the experience they have had with you when you were married to them is that you're basically, when you're with a narcissist, and actually I've been there, right? You feel like you always need to give in to them. They always need to be right, and so their experience the narcissist is having is, I always get my way. And anytime you put up opposition to a narcissist, eventually you cave. You cave because you don't want to take any more stuff from them, or you cave because you want to protect the children. A lot of times people, find themselves twisting themselves into an emotional pretzel for the sake of the children. They just don't want their children to be exposed to that stuff. But the narcissist experience is, I'm winning. Then I say, oh my God, I'm a woman now. In case you didn't know, I'm calling Chris Bruce. And Chris says, all right, you got to stop caving. And so it makes sense that the next step would be, when I say something, I need to really mean it. And that's going to elicit a real piss and vinegar response on the other side.
The problem with divorce is not knowing the territory. When we know the territory, it's easier to make choices. Well, we've created the divorce guide for you. This is a free ebook that's going to help you learn the territory and help you to make better decisions. And all you need to do is go to bit.ly/the divorce guide. Just one word, the divorce guide, bit.ly/the divorce guide. Get it now.
You know what? Sometimes it does, but it's usually the quickest way to get through the whole process, which is often not easy. Because the other approach, let's extend the olive branch approach and just work things out. Usually it's just, you can't negotiate with a terrorist. That's just my viewpoint in doing this, is basically negotiating with a terrorist. They take you in so many circles. They have time to manipulate you, which is what they've done for most of the relationship. And the legal process, which is exceptionally expensive in most places with most people, it takes longer than when it's just direct and to the point. And when you start off going in circles or trying to be passive, it takes even longer to earn their respect in negotiations. If you have a chance at getting it over without court, you need to earn their respect in the negotiations. And that can take a while. The longer you delay being direct and professional and purpose-driven, the longer it's going to take to get it over with, or the worse the result will be.
Yeah, so you need to be consistent. And, if you're divorcing a narcissist or if you're thinking about divorcing a narcissist, or if you think you're living with if you think you are living with a narcissist, the advice that we always give people here at Rich in Relationship who are in that position is, the first thing you need to do is establish some kind of safety zone for yourself. It might be a room in the house. It might be a separate place to live, someplace where you can go, where you can close that person out, where they won't come in after you, where you can feel like you have your own space, a place where you can recover yourself. because, that whole experience of twisting yourself into a pretzel to protect the children and giving in, that's a tough pattern to break. And in their presence, that, your natural tendency is going to be, I surrender. So you want to go someplace where you can recover yourself and hold to your commitment. Okay, so let's say they've got that safe place. They're working with Chris Bruce. They've served them with papers. They've stuck to their guns. What comes next?
Usually, the first real test that they get is at a spot called the mediation, and this is, I think, one of the most pivotal points in the case. If they maintain, they don't talk to the person, they don't allow themselves to be manipulated. The mediation, which in a lot of the courtrooms around the country, it's mostly the same. The judges want you to go try to mediate before you're in any significant
it's
court
a requirement
hearing. Before you can go to that.
Yeah.
It is. And in Florida, it's really to do anything, you have to mediate, which is a good thing because that's where a lot of people resolve their disputes. So you want to have your lawyer coming out the gate, being direct, getting the documents, following up on what's missing, when the right time, asking for a final court date. But the mediation is where the real test comes in usually. And what's usually going to happen is the narcissist is going to do some serious boundary testing, I call it. They're going to try to engage in a ridiculous negotiation, which usually ends with them. For some reason, it's just usually a nonsensical occurrence. They will leave the mediation and the negotiation, and they will blame it on you. And that's when the real negotiation happens, because what they're going to try to do is they're going to take advantage of that feeling you have of finally being able to possibly be free of them and have everything over. And they're going to take advantage of how you feel and how let down you feel when they leave that mediation or stop the negotiations. Mm-hmm. And they're going to circle back around you when you're not around your lawyer, when you're not in that safe place. And they're going to try to intimidate you into taking a bad settlement or going back to them in the relationship. And if you can get through that, if you know it's coming, we educate our clients about this. We do our best to prepare them. It's still we always look to see how we can do more. But if our clients can get through that, that usually gives them the best chance to negotiate an end to everything with the ongoing looming court process. But that's where a lot of this stuff's won and lost, really.
And interestingly, narcissists are very committed to beating and winning the person that they're married to. That attitude often does not carry over to their attorney. And it doesn't carry over to the judge a lot. They'll bow to a judge. They want to look good in front of the judge. They want to look good in front of other people. So, which is kind of wild when you think about it. You think, oh, narcissists, they just want to beat everyone. It's like, no, they're committed to squashing you. And the good news about that is they will do their best to appear to be anything like they have been appearing with you when they're with other people. I'm curious. I've worked with a lot of clients who have a narcissist on the other side, and the narcissist is actually has taken them, look, we really should mediate this. And it turns out that that's usually a move to manipulate the person who wants to divorce them in a setting without a judge. What would you suggest to people who find themselves in that position?
Well, if that's the case, and it's I would get an attorney to give you legal advice and have an attorney, with you in the process. Now, the mediation process, you're probably going to resolve your divorce that way. I mean, even with narcissists, it's probably 19 out of 20 cases my firm handles, maybe 9 out of 10 are resolved outside of court. So the reality is you're probably going to settle through mediation. It's just you need somebody that can be there to advocate and negotiate well for you. So the mediation I think you're talking about, Rich, we see a lot is that they try to drag their spouse to it without the spouse having a lawyer, having the full information, things like that. And then they use it to either scare their spouse into staying with them or to basically get the spouse to start the negotiations and bidding at a very low, unrealistic level that might not meet their needs for their after divorce life. And from that, even when the people get lawyers later, it's you really have to almost pretend as that mediation never existed. So for most women, if you're really or men, and if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, you shouldn't go to that mediation until you have legal counsel. Unless for people who, if they don't have kids, if they're self-supporting, they don't really have a whole lot of money to fight over. Well, in that case, I mean, maybe you can go and try and just see if you can get everything done with. But even then, you be very careful.
Love it. So it sounds like having that one who's on your side in the room with you and supporting you is going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that to sell legal services. It's most people who get divorced can do so without a lawyer. It's kind of scary. I just said that. I hope that's not the soundbite, but that's the reality. That's true. And when you need an attorney to help you, it's when you're not on an equal playing field. When you have a history, a demonstrated history of not being able to have fair conversations on hard things, and that's really, besides the money stuff. And there's all kinds of stuff lawyers do that are important when there's a lot of money or long-term things involved, but it's just being able to have a fair conversation because you're getting away from the person, because you can't do that. That's why you feel like you're walking on eggshells in your life. That's where the attorney comes in to help, or at least a friend if you don't have the money for lawyers, somebody who can keep you grounded and who can do the talking for you, or just, be objective about the facts.
And that's interesting. So let's say that you're divorcing a narcissist and they've been controlling all the funds. What recourse do you have in that circumstance?
What we tell most of our clients to do, and I mean, every case is different, but almost always it's if it's likely that there's money to justify doing this, and we look for telltale signs. I mean, today we're down in South Florida, kind of, if they live in a home with a 12-stall barn, 10-acre lot right next to the Rural Equestrian Center, well, like, we're probably going to say you should pay a lawyer to do financial due diligence and get an idea of what are the assets, debts, and income that we have to deal with. And lawyers, sometimes with the help of forensic accountants, with the power of subpoenas, looking at the right places with the methods that a lot of the lawyers use, they can generally get to the bottom of, most of the big picture finances. And that's what we recommend our clients do before making important decisions.
Makes perfect sense. And sort of the last piece of this is, in my experience, actually, most people who are divorcing a narcissist, there is 9 times out of 10 children involved. And I think my belief is, as someone who divorced a narcissist, as someone who was a child in a relationship where a narcissist was being divorced, and as someone who's worked with a ton of women who are divorcing narcissists, it's usually because you don't really know that you're in an upside down relationship until you start to see how they treat the children. And you sort of go, wait a minute, that's not right. And you start to realize that things that you've been tolerating for yourself, you would never tolerate your children to be treated that way. All right, so this is a long intro to my next question. You see why I can't be interviewed on podcasts? So the long intro to the question goes here. So you're divorcing a narcissist and you got a couple of kids together. And let's face it, there's not a judge in America who's going to say, that guy's a narcissist, he really shouldn't have a relationship with his children. And honestly, even if your husband or wife is a narcissist, your children probably should have a relationship with them. What would your advice be to people who are in that position? I mean, they're getting to the end of the divorce. They've got these children in common, and they're concerned about the well-being of the children in relationship to the other person.
Yeah, it's first, the advice is don't wait. I feel convinced that it's better to separate yourself from an abusive relationship, really any abusive relationship, even if there's kids involved. Look, if your child in their last 3 months of high school, maybe you wait for him or her to graduate, but absent stuff like that, there's always going to be a reason with the kids that makes leaving hard. And so much of the people I've sought out to learn about what creates the people who marry narcissists and narcissists in the first place, it comes down to what children experience growing up. How do they model their behavior? And even if the divorce is hard, even if it's hard on them, even if not all of the children are helped by the divorce, usually there'll be at least one that will see usually their mother setting a different example, setting a different way of life, sending signals that living like this is not okay. And, your child will have, difficulties or challenges of moving on from the divorce, like any children does with any type of change. You're really giving them a chance to live a different life by not waiting, by not staying for the sake of the kids. I think with most people in most circumstances, staying for the sake of the kids really just hurts most of the children in the long run. So I wouldn't let the children be the thing that keeps the relationship together. As a parent of young kids myself, that's how I look at it.
Yeah, let me back you up on that. The statistics show that there are kind of 4 categories of stress to children. So at the tippy top are people who have really good marriages. Those kids are just happier than pigs in mud. We're like, there are no kids listening to this show, but I'm still going to keep it clean today. Happier than pigs in whatever they hang out in, right? If 2 parents are getting along and they have shared values, so they're of a like mind, the kids are really, they do great. The next is 2 people who are divorced, but have shared values and co-parent together. Those kids are the next. The next after that are people who are not of the same mind. They're what we call parallel parents. Maybe one's a narcissist and the other one isn't, right? Those kids, they don't do quite as well as the kid. Well, they're more stress is a better way to put it. It demands a higher level of resilience than the other 2. The worst is people who are married but don't get along and have children together. So you're actually better off, not staying for the sake of the kids. If we're talking about the kids anyway, you're better off divorcing the narcissist, because that's going to move your children's well-being up a whole notch there. And I agree with you 100%. When you take a stand for yourself, when you're in a relationship like that and you take a stand for yourself, your children may try on the clothes, the emotional clothes of the narcissist, but eventually they're going to go, this just isn't comfortable. Mom, has cares about other people. She's all about a good that's outside of herself as well as herself. That's a better way to live.
I agree, and sometimes I've said this to so many of my clients, and it's just a practical statement. Doesn't make it any easier, but sometimes in life you have to make choices, and you have to choose the better option, and none of the choices are decisions you ever wanted to make, but you just have to look at the reality of it and choose what is best with where you're at. There is no go back in time machine. There's only controlling the future. And, by moving on from those hard relationships, you give your kids better odds for being, better, having a happier childhood with what's left, and being better members of society in the future that hopefully don't recreate the same pattern.
Yep. Yeah. And somehow I find myself wanting to say that, if you married someone like this, like I did, it's not worth beating yourself up over it, because you made the best choice that you could at that time, right? The lessons you learned from that now that make it look like it was a bad decision then are lessons you hadn't learned yet, right? We are right where we need to be. Hey, Chris, you're like, by the way, you are the most knowledgeable attorney on narcissism I've ever had on this show. And I've interviewed I have interviewed a bunch of attorneys. Like, you actually really understand this. Like, super cool. I wanted to acknowledge you there. Like, you really get this. What resources you have for people? How can they find you? How can they learn more?
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for the compliment. It's just like coming up on close to 180 podcasts, Rich. So it's quite a statement. I might tell that to the kids at dinner tonight. But in all seriousness, thanks for the opportunity. Christopher Bruce, Bruce Law Firm, and we serve South Florida. Our law firm website is brucepa.com. We have a lot of helpful information. We try to be as helpful as possible, even for people who don't end up working with us, live in other areas, or just can't afford to have an attorney. And there's a website people should take note. It's divorceinformationbooks.com. That's divorceinformationbooks.com. And if people go there, they can download for free all of the 5, 6, maybe even 7 books about the divorce process, how to get ready for it, how to control your difficult divorce is one of the titles. And one of my favorites is How to Divorce Your Controlling, Manipulative, Narcissistic Husband. It's all on there. And when you download the book, we know people want hard copies. There's a form you can fill out. We can mail them to you for free. We don't charge for them. If you're in the Wellington, West Palm area, we can have you pick them up at the office. It's just there for you. And real quick, before we go, there's another website, staymarriedflorida.com. That's staymarriedflorida.com. It's got a lot of outstanding resources for fixing relationships, a lot of great therapists. Rich, you're on there, people to help you through the divorce process when it happens. And there's a podcast that goes with that, with a lot of good information. So a lot of stuff out there.
I'm on there?
Yeah, I think. Oh, wait. You got to get back to me on that.
Well,
You need
hey,
to get me on there.
we'll
You will
talk about
soon.
that. Well, listen,
In my head, you were.
I actually found Chris through his book. Like I was just Googling and I actually found him through his book on how to divorce an abusive, narcissistic partner, husband. I downloaded the book. I downloaded the book and read it. I was like, oh, I got to meet this guy. So I went out of my way. And Chris and I actually broken bread together. Well, we broke salad together, really, if we're going to be honest. And that's how we ended up on the show. And I highly recommend this. Is a really informative. This is not some AI generated book. Like there's so many of these books that are generated by AIs that have the same 5 steps over and over and over. This is a truly informative book. And I'm also, while I'm here, I'm going to make a pitch for the Divorce Detox, which is the workbook we have here at Rich in Relationship. It's actually geared specifically for women who are divorcing a toxic spouse. And we have an online course, which is very low cost. And of course, we've got coaching services also. And all of the links for the Bruce Law Firm and for Chris's books and for our stuff is all in the notes. So you don't have to write all that down. You can always find us through RICHINRELATIONSHIP.com, richrelationship.com. Chris, the question I ask everyone at the end of the show, and I'm sorry to say it's the end of the show, is actually, I'm going to hold off on the question. I want to say something else. I just want to make sure if you're a woman listening to this podcast, Chris, his partner and wife, also does this work. I've met women who didn't want to work with me because I was a man and they were divorcing a narcissistic man. And I ended up referring them to a female coach. And I've met women who want to work only with women, and who could blame them if you're really feeling abused and ambushed. Chris's wife is also an expert in this area, and you have a number of women attorneys also, don't you, Chris?
That's right. All of our 10 out of 11 of our attorneys are female, except for me. So we've got a lot of wonderful women that help our female clients through this process.
I actually think that's really super important. I've been reading all about, did you know there are actually, this is a whole nother podcast, but I'm going to throw it out here anyway. There's actually physical differences between the male brain and the female brain, or really, since there's 9 million genders now, brains that evolve in a body that has male chemistry, a lot of testosterone, versus brains that evolve in a female body that has higher estrogen. There's physical differences between the brain. There's differences between the way they think, what they observe, what they see. This men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing is grounded in our chemistry. And so it might be that you're going to connect better with a woman.
I believe a lot of what you're saying. And I mean, I guess I'm a male. I think I do a pretty good job doing what I do. But I think it's just, maybe it's self-selecting through the mission we have is our business and the way we want to help people. But we found usually female attorneys are the best at the emotional piece of this puzzle, which we work hard to not neglect.
Yeah, and the studies show there's a reason for that too. And you know what? We are going to do a podcast on that, but not today. All right, so the question I'm going to ask you is, what is the legacy you'd like to leave behind, sir?
What I want to leave behind is, it sounds, I want to make the world a better place, which sounds so cliche, but really through the work that my business does, our law firm, through helping people, we want to try through the people that we come in contact with. If we can, get one person a year or a day, or even in our whole career, to live their life a little bit differently, to feel empowered, to have a life that's healthy, to where they can respect themselves, we've really accomplished our mission. Because when people can do that, they set an example for others. If they have children, it's especially important for them, and even other acquaintances that look up to them. Because a lot of this stuff with this narcissism and these toxic relationships that come out of it, when people learn more about how they got into those relationships in the first place, and how they can avoid them in the future, and what made them who they are, and what made their spouse who they are, then all that information can go into raising the future generation of the world, raising our children. And little bitty changes with each generation can help, in my point of view, doing this stuff for a living, can really start to eliminate these types of relationships in society. So that's really what I'd like to do. And I'd love to have my daughter grow up and son in a world that's just a teeny bit better because of the relationships that that people have. So I don't know, maybe some other people say that, but I feel that we're doing it, and that's the biggest way that I can try to make the world a better place after I'm gone.
I love that. I love that. You know what I love about that is I remember when somebody introduced the idea of generational sin to me, and I was like, oh, come on, what are you talking about? But then when I got into this work, got my master's in social work, I found out that actually emotional patterns are passed on from generation to generation. It's not necessarily genetic.
Yeah.
That, you know, that basically that concept of generational sin, or really that concept of there's things that we don't do well that are painful to other people, get passed on from generation to generation. And I love that you are in the business of helping people heal that.
Well, thank you so much. It's our passion. It's my purpose and that of my team. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you about it here today.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Rich. It's been an absolute pleasure. First time. It was a lot of fun. I want to do more.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to get you on some more podcasts somehow. All right. Have a great day, sir.
You too.